There's something magnetic about a man who isn't easily moved, not cold in a cruel way, but composed, unreadable, grounded. This kind of man doesn't flinch when she tests him. He doesn't rush to explain himself, and he never tries to prove his worth. Instead, his silence says, "I know who I am." That quiet confidence, it pulls her in. Because women don't chase men who explain everything. They chase the ones they can't fully figure out. If she knows what you'll say, what you'll feel, how you'll react, the game is over before it begins. But when she senses a gap, a mystery, she starts leaning in. That's the power of cold behavior, not detachment, but presence without eagerness. The kind of presence that says, "I don't need you to choose me. I already chose me." And that energy, that's what flips the dynamic. Let's break down the 3 cold behaviors that trigger a woman's chase mode faster than anything else. The first cold behavior is emotional stillness. When she gets reactive, dramatic, or throws emotional jabs to test your center, and you stay calm, unbothered, and grounded, something inside her flips. Most men either retreat, get defensive, or try to fix things. But the man who doesn't flinch, he becomes unshakable in her eyes. Your calmness isn't just attractive, it's confusing. Because her subconscious was waiting for a reaction, and you didn't give her one. That silence? It speaks louder than words. It tells her you're not dependent on her emotional waves to feel secure in yourself. You don't need to explain. You don't need to win. You just are. And in that stillness, she starts to question. Why is he so calm? What does he know that I don't? Why doesn't he chase after my validation like everyone else? That's when the chase begins. Not because you pulled away, but because you stayed still when she tried to shake you. Emotional stillness is power. The second cold behavior is disappearing into your purpose, not ghosting her, not playing games, but becoming so immersed in your own mission that her presence becomes a complement, not a necessity. When you stop orbiting her world and instead make her orbit yours, the polarity shifts. Women don't chase men who are needy. They chase men who are moving, forward, upward, inward. When she senses that your time is sacred, your focus is sharp, and your life has momentum, with or without her, she feels an undeniable pull. It's not about ignoring her. It's about honoring your path more than her approval. She starts wondering, why hasn't he texted me today? Is he thinking about me? Is he losing interest? But the truth is, you're not trying to make her chase. You're just living fully. And that, paradoxically, is what ignites the chase. Because nothing is more magnetic than a man who doesn't need her, but chooses her from a place of fullness. Purpose is the ultimate aphrodisiac. If this is hitting something deep, hit subscribe and tap the bell. There's more coming that you won't want to miss. The third cold behavior is emotional unavailability, but not the kind that comes from trauma or fear. It's the quiet, composed restraint of a man who doesn't spill his heart to earn closeness. When she asks what you're thinking, you smile and say, "Nothing important." When she digs for feelings, you don't crack open like a diary. You offer pieces, not pages. Why? Because mystery builds desire. When she can't fully read you, she stays curious. When you're selective with your emotions, she values the moments you do open up. She wonders what you're hiding, not because you're secretive, but because you're sovereign. Women chase the man who guards his emotional core, who reveals himself like a slow-burning novel, not a social media post. You don't use emotions to bond. You use presence, consistency, depth. You remain grounded, unreadable, intriguing. And that space you keep? That's what keeps her chasing, because she wants to be the one who finally unlocks you. But here's the secret. It's not just about what you withhold. It's about what you embody. When you're cold, you're not cruel. You're centered. You're not detached because you don't care. You're detached because your world doesn't revolve around her reaction. You don't need her mood to validate your masculinity. You don't adjust your tone to keep her happy. You don't chase emotional resolution to soothe her anxiety. You let silence sit. You let tension breathe. Because that's where polarity is born. A woman will test you emotionally, not to break you, but to feel you. She wants to know, can you hold her fire without flinching? Can you witness her chaos without scrambling for control? The cold man doesn't suppress or ignore. He receives. Calm, unbothered, steady. And that steadiness? It makes her nervous, in the best way. Because deep down, every woman knows, the man who can't be shaken is the man worth surrendering to. And here's where it flips. When she senses your cold presence is not a tactic, but a truth, something primal activates in her. Curiosity, longing, a pull she can't explain. Why isn't he reacting like the others? Why doesn't he chase when I pull away? Why do I feel more drawn the more he gives me space? That's when you enter her mind, not as a needy figure trying to earn affection, but as a mystery, an enigma. She replays your pauses, your silences, your glances, trying to decode what you're feeling, because you're not broadcasting it like every other man. And the more uncertain she is, the more invested she becomes. Because unpredictability creates emotional hooks. It keeps her guessing, wondering, wanting. She starts to chase, not for validation, but for understanding. Because to understand you means to feel closer to something rare. And here's the paradox. By not trying to be understood, you become unforgettable. By not over-explaining your thoughts, your silence speaks louder. She starts noticing small things, the way you glance at her and then look away, the way you end conversations first, the way you disappear for a day and come back grounded, unchanged. Each cold behavior isn't a game, it's an echo of your inner world, a world not easily accessible, and that makes her want to be part of it. Because what we can't fully grasp, we crave more. She tells herself she's not chasing, just trying to connect. But her texts come quicker, her glances linger longer, and her questions become more personal. She's trying to find the thread that unravels your mind. But there is none. Because you've stopped giving people blueprints to your soul. And that is where the chase begins. She starts testing the waters, dropping subtle remarks, teasing you, pulling back to see if you'll follow. But you don't. You respond with calm indifference, not coldness, not cruelty, just presence without pursuit. And that drives her curiosity wild. You're the man who doesn't need her validation, who doesn't react on command. You don't mirror her games, you dissolve them. When she withdraws, you don't chase. You let her come to terms with her own uncertainty. And when she returns, looking for signs of weakness or desperation, all she finds is composure. That's when the shift happens. She realizes she's no longer the one being pursued. You've flipped the dynamic without a single word. Not by pretending not to care, but by truly not needing her attention to validate your worth. And that's a rare energy she can't ignore. The second cold behavior that activates her chase mode is unpredictability. Not in your emotions, but in your rhythm. You're not the guy who texts good morning every day at the same time. You're not the one who's always free, always available, always waiting. Sometimes you answer fast. Sometimes you take your time. Sometimes you plan ahead. Sometimes you disappear to focus on your world. This unpredictability doesn't come from strategy. It comes from being immersed in your own purpose. She can't read you, and that keeps her intrigued. She starts wondering, what's he doing? Who is he with? Why isn't he here right now? That uncertainty plants seeds of longing, because predictability breeds boredom. But a man on a mission, a man who lives for more than just her, becomes a puzzle she craves to solve. And every time she thinks she's figured you out, your next move proves otherwise. And here's the thing. This unpredictability doesn't mean playing games. It's not about manipulation. It's about authenticity. When your life is full, when your time is valuable, when you're not glued to your phone waiting for her reply, she feels it. She senses that you're not orbiting around her world. You're building your own. That subtle detachment makes her lean in. She starts sending longer messages. She initiates plans. She dresses better when she sees you. Why? Because she doesn't feel owned. She feels inspired to earn your attention. And women chase what they can't fully hold, what they can't quite label, what keeps them on their toes. When your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee, it triggers her primal instinct to pursue. Because now, your energy feels like a reward, not a routine. When you walk into a room and you're not scanning for her reaction, that's cold. Not in a cruel way, but in a grounded, sovereign way. You're centered in yourself. Your validation isn't outsourced. That's magnetic. She watches you laugh with others, stay composed under pressure, and not flinch when she tests your limits. That calm detachment whispers, I'm not here to impress. I'm here to express. And in a world where most men bend to gain approval, your stillness becomes rare. She starts wondering what makes you tick, why you're not chasing, why you're not reacting. That mystery, that's what triggers her pursuit. Not because you're distant, but because you're whole. She tests your masculinity by observing how you handle silence. When there's a pause in the conversation, do you rush to fill it? Or can you sit in it, unbothered, letting her feel the gravity of your presence? Most men break under that silence. They start talking, over-explaining, trying to win her back into comfort. But the man who owns silence owns power. His eyes don't dart. His posture doesn't shift. He doesn't need to break the moment, because he's not afraid of being fully seen. That unshakable composure tells her more than words ever could. You're the mountain, not the wind. You don't chase her attention, you anchor it. She watches how you respond to other women, not just when you're with her, but when you're around waitresses, coworkers, even strangers. She's reading your micro-reactions. Are you secretly craving validation from every attractive woman? Or do you stay centered, unfazed, rooted in your value? The man who flirts to prove he still has it is transparent, but the man who moves with quiet certainty, who doesn't need female attention to feel like a man, that's who stirs something deeper. She doesn't want a man who's available to all. She wants the man who is selective, whose presence feels earned. That kind of energy makes her wonder, what would it take for him to choose me? Silence is another test. She brings up something emotional, maybe even provocative, and then waits. She wants to see. Will you rush to fix it, to explain yourself, to defend your ego? But the man who sits in the tension, who doesn't fill the silence just to escape discomfort, radiates power. He doesn't need to chase peace or control outcomes. He lets the silence work for him. And in that stillness, she feels something strange. Attraction. Because unpredictability isn't about chaos. It's about restraint. And when a man shows he can stay centered while others flinch, he becomes magnetic in the most primal way. Then there's the test of absence. She cancels a plan last minute, doesn't reply for a day, pulls away emotionally. Most men panic. They double text. They apologize. They seek reassurance. But not the unpredictable man. He doesn't chase what's pulling away. He mirrors the distance, not out of games, but because he's not ruled by fear of loss. He lives by principle, not pressure. And here's the paradox. When she sees he can live without her, she starts fearing a life without him. This isn't manipulation, it's polarity. When a man is grounded in his value, space doesn't create disconnection. It creates curiosity. She starts leaning in because his calm absence says more than words ever could. Silence is another test. She brings drama, accusations, tries to provoke a reaction, not because she wants to fight, but because she wants to feel your center. Most men fail here. They get defensive, justify, raise their voice. But the unpredictable man remains unmoved. He listens, but doesn't lose himself. He speaks less, but with more weight. His silence isn't passive, it's powerful. It says, I don't need to prove anything. That calm presence unsettles her in the best way. Because deep down, she's not testing your facts. She's testing your frame. And silence, when anchored in self-trust, becomes the loudest proof of masculine leadership. Then comes inconsistency, not in your integrity, but in your rhythm. Most men are clockwork. Same good morning texts, same Friday plans, same predictable energy. But you, sometimes you're warm, sometimes distant, sometimes available, sometimes immersed in your own world. Not because you're playing games, but because you're a man with a life, a mission, a depth she can't fully map. This inconsistency drives her wild, not because it's manipulative, but because it's real. She can't place you in a box, and that unpredictability makes you magnetic. Because when a woman feels like she can fully predict you, she stops being curious. But when you move like the ocean, calm but never static, she watches every wave. A woman's mind is wired to seek patterns. It's part of how she feels safe. But desire doesn't live in safety. It thrives in mystery. When she can't fully decode you, when your next move isn't obvious, it triggers a deep primal curiosity. She starts leaning in, wondering what you're thinking, what you'll say next, whether she's still the center of your attention, or if something else now holds it. That unspoken tension keeps her invested. Not because you're being cold, but because you're not being needy. You're grounded, present when you're with her, but never orbiting around her. And that emotional posture, it's the difference between being pursued and being forgotten. When a man shows he can walk away, not out of anger, not as a game, but from quiet self-respect, it burns into a woman's memory. She may not show it. She might even act unfazed. But something shifts, because that kind of calm detachment, it's rare. It tells her you're not trying to control, to convince, to chase. You're simply choosing. And when you choose her, it feels real, valuable, worth holding on to, because you've already shown you don't chase love, you attract it. And if she wants it, she has to step toward you. The truth is, unpredictability isn't about playing games or hiding who you are. It's about having depth, layers, edges she hasn't seen yet. It's about being the man who surprises, not with tricks, but with growth, with presence, with stillness. One day you're quiet and reflective. The next, bold and playful. Not because you're unstable, but because you're alive. And when she sees that you're not just a chapter, you're a whole story she hasn't finished reading, she chases. Not because you made her, but because she feels something she can't explain. And once she's felt that, she won't want to lose it again.